It was a cool evening in Atlanta, the kind that hinted at rain before the clouds even fully gathered. The city's downtown hummed with restless energy, car engines idling, brakes squeaking, and the low murmur of drivers searching desperately for a free parking spot. Neon signs flickered as people hurried past glass storefronts, trying to finish errands before the weather turned sour. Officer Brian Lowe sat behind the wheel of his patrol car, his jaw clenched in frustration. Another slow night with nothing to do but deal with petty complaints and minor annoyances. So far, he'd handled a noisy party down the block, a few jaywalkers, and now this. A black Acura, parked illegally by a bright red fire hydrant on Main Street. Brian stepped out, boots clicking on the pavement as he approached the vehicle. Through the tinted window, he saw a woman calmly typing away on her phone. She was dressed sharply in a navy blue pantsuit, something out of place here among the tired cars and dim streetlights. "Ma'am, you're parked in a no-parking zone," he barked, trying to sound authoritative. The woman looked up slowly, her expression unruffled. She slid her phone into her lap and reached into her purse. "Officer, I have a valid permit," she said evenly, pulling out a placard and holding it up to the window. Brian barely glanced at it. "This area is reserved for emergency vehicles. You need to move your car." "I'm authorized," she replied quietly. "This spot is open for government employees after 6 p.m. I work for the Department of Internal Affairs." He scoffed. "I don't care who you work for. You're blocking a fire hydrant, and that's a violation." The woman didn't argue. Instead, she reached again for her phone, her calmness unshaken by his rising anger. Brian's pride stung. Here he was, trying to assert control over the situation, and she was treating him like he was just an annoyance. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered sharply. "On what grounds?" she asked, her voice polite but firm. Brian's patience snapped. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over the dashboard, as he demanded her license and registration. The woman's eyes didn't flinch. She slowly pulled out her wallet and handed over the documents. By now, a small crowd had gathered, curious onlookers pausing in their evening routines. Some slowed down to watch the confrontation. Others stopped to record on their phones. The tension thickened. When Brian noticed her phone light up again, he warned, "Put that away. No filming allowed during police stops." She ignored him, tapping the record button. The sight of the glowing red dot startled him. His confidence wavered, but only for a moment. 15 minutes later, Brian had written a citation and filled out a report. He claimed the woman had been uncooperative and verbally aggressive, though the footage would later prove otherwise. She signed the paperwork silently, her gaze calm but piercing. As she closed the door and walked away, Brian felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He didn't know her name. He didn't know who she was, but something about her left an impression. 3 weeks later, a notice arrived at his precinct. A court summons for the case of the illegal parking fine. Routine paperwork, he thought. Just another day in the life of a police officer. But this was no ordinary case. That chilly evening on Main Street seemed unremarkable at first. A simple parking violation handled with a firm hand. But beneath the surface simmered a story of power, prejudice, and justice. Brian Lowe was confident that the courtroom would back him up. After all, he had his reports and photos. What could possibly go wrong? The woman had entered his jurisdiction quietly, but would shake it to its core. The city's routine hustle masked deeper tensions, unspoken histories of mistrust between law enforcement and the communities they policed. But Brian was blind to all of that. In his mind, law and order meant enforcing rules, and the rules were black and white. Yet, that night, when he pulled that black Acura from a fire hydrant and issued a ticket. He unknowingly set in motion a chain of events that would expose cracks in the system and his own vulnerabilities. What Brian didn't see was the quiet strength behind the woman's steady eyes, the years of training, the deep sense of justice that didn't bow to intimidation. She was no ordinary citizen. She carried with her the power to challenge an entire culture of abuse of authority. And so, as the city's lights flickered and rain threatened, a parking spot became the battlefield where a battle far bigger than a simple fine would be fought. The courtroom was humming with the quiet buzz of routine. Early morning sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows on polished wood and tiled floors. The scent of old leather and worn paper hung in the air like a silent witness to the many battles fought here. Officer Brian Lowe arrived in full uniform, chest puffed out, his boots clicking confidently as he walked through the heavy oak doors. This was familiar territory, a place where he was in control, where the weight of a badge meant respect and authority was rarely questioned. Judge Jenkins sat behind his bench, a man whose graying hair and lined face told stories of decades spent dispensing justice. He had a reputation, stern, no nonsense, but known to side with law enforcement when the facts were clear. Brian had met him many times before. They understood each other. The gallery held a handful of people: curious neighbors, a reporter with a notepad, a few city officials. Nothing unusual for a parking fine hearing. The bailiff called the next case. Morgan versus Lowe, alleged illegal parking and improper conduct. Brian smirked. Easy win, he thought. Another citizen trying to use rights as a shield. He pulled out his ticket book and prepared to deliver his usual testimony. Then she walked in, calm, composed, her steps measured but full of quiet confidence. Agent Morgan entered the courtroom. Dressed in a tailored dark suit that matched the gravity of the moment, she carried a slim leather folder under one arm. Her presence shifted the atmosphere instantly, as if the entire room collectively caught its breath. Brian's heart skipped. This was not the woman he had encountered that night. This was something else entirely. Judge Jenkins's eyes narrowed as he glanced at the agent's badge clipped to her belt, a federal emblem shining under the courtroom lights. "You are a federal agent?" the judge asked, incredulous. Agent Morgan nodded, her voice clear and unwavering. "Yes, Your Honor. Department of Internal Investigations, Undercover Division." The murmurs in the gallery grew louder. Brian's confident facade began to crack. What was going on here? Morgan opened her folder, flipping through neatly organized files. She produced a small tablet and tapped the screen, projecting video footage onto the courtroom's monitor. "This is the incident on Main Street, May 12th, she said, her tone precise. "The video captures everything: your approach, the interaction with me, and the fact that I showed you a valid permit. Contrary to your report, I remained calm and cooperative throughout." The courtroom was silent, save for the faint hum of the projector. Morgan clicked through more files: audio recordings from bystanders, witness statements from passers-by, and time-stamped photos. Each piece chipped away at the narrative Brian had built in his official report. "And this is not an isolated case," she continued. "We have reviewed your conduct over the past 6 months. 9 separate complaints filed against you. 9 incidents with strikingly similar allegations: aggressive behavior, failure to provide documents, and obstruction of duties. All cases involved minorities." The judge's stern expression softened to concern. "Is this true, Officer Lowe?" Brian swallowed hard. He opened his mouth to respond, but was cut off. "Sergeant Lowe," Judge Jenkins said firmly, "you have the right to remain silent." Brian's face paled. The weight of the moment crushed the arrogance that had carried him into the room. Agent Morgan's voice filled the courtroom once more. "These are the results of a thorough investigation by our office. We cannot allow those who misuse authority to continue unchecked. The badge is not a shield for misconduct." She looked out toward the audience, her eyes steady and fierce. "I stand here not to punish, but to uphold the law equally and fairly, to ensure justice does not discriminate." At that moment, the judge pressed a button on his bench. 2 agents from the FBI stepped briskly into the room, their presence authoritative and silent. They approached Brian and quietly placed handcuffs on him. The room erupted in stunned whispers. Brian's gaze was glassy. His world was unraveling before his eyes. The man who had once believed his badge granted him untouchable power was now a prisoner to his own actions. As he was led away, Judge Jenkins addressed the courtroom. "This case serves as a reminder. Justice must be blind, and accountability applies to all." In the back of the room, a young black man watched quietly. His eyes met Morgan's across the crowded courtroom. Without words, a silent thanks passed between them, a recognition of battles fought beyond what the eye could see. Outside the courthouse, the news spread like wildfire. The story of the federal agent who exposed corruption within the police force made headlines overnight. The city, once complacent, began to ask uncomfortable questions. How many other officers had abused their power? How many cases were tainted by prejudice? Community leaders called for reviews. Civil rights groups demanded reforms. The local government promised transparency and action. Meanwhile, Agent Morgan returned to Washington, her mission far from over. On her desk lay a new file. Another city, another officer, the same troubling patterns. She opened it with a deep breath, ready to fight again, because true justice is relentless, and as long as there are those who believe a badge grants immunity, there will be those who stand to hold them accountable. The sound of cold metal clicking shut was deafening in the stillness of the courthouse hallway. Handcuffs snapped onto Sergeant Brian Lowe's wrists, a stark, unforgiving reminder that his badge was no longer a shield. As the FBI agents guided him out, his eyes darted around, searching for something familiar, some sign that the world he once ruled with authority still belonged to him. But it didn't. Behind him, the courtroom remained suspended in silence, the echoes of her words still ringing. The badge is not a shield from justice. Brian's career, the years of service, the supposed respect, the small victories, crumbled in mere moments. What he had dismissed as a minor inconvenience was now a public reckoning, a collapse under the weight of truth. Outside, the city was waking up to the news. Television anchors spoke in somber tones. Newspapers ran bold headlines. Officer arrested for abuse of power. Systemic bias in law enforcement exposed. Justice triumphs in Atlanta. For many, it was a long overdue validation. For others, a painful disruption of what they believed their city stood for. Inside the courthouse, the mood shifted rapidly. Whispers turned into conversations. Faces once indifferent now reflected a mix of shock, relief, and cautious hope. Journalists scrambled to get statements. Activists gathered, sensing a turning point. Among them, a young woman stood quietly in the corner. She had seen this before, in countless cities, countless cases. A system designed to protect itself, slowly cracking when met with unwavering truth. Agent Morgan folded the last file and stood, her mission clear but far from complete. Her role was not to bask in the moment, but to fuel the fire of justice. Back in the precinct, Brian's arrest sent shockwaves through the ranks. Officers whispered in hallways, some shocked, others fearful of what might come next. His personnel file, once sealed and protected, was thrown open for scrutiny. Every case he'd touched was now under review. Victims who had long felt silenced found new courage. They came forward with stories of intimidation, unfair treatment, and worse. The city council convened emergency sessions. Committees were formed to examine policing policies and systemic issues. It was more than a scandal. It was a catalyst. Meanwhile, Brian sat in a cold interrogation room, the harsh overhead light casting deep shadows across his face. His thoughts raced, trying to make sense of how quickly power had slipped from his grasp. He remembered the night he pulled over Agent Morgan, how he'd believed himself untouchable. He thought the uniform granted him authority beyond reproach. But now, stripped of his badge, the man behind the uniform was vulnerable, exposed. His attorney advised caution, but Brian's mind was elsewhere. It was the first time in years he truly understood the weight of accountability. The public reaction was immediate and intense. Community leaders praised the courage of Agent Morgan and the investigative team. They hailed the decision as a step toward rebuilding trust between law enforcement and the people they serve. But skepticism lingered. Some questioned how long similar misconduct had gone unnoticed. Others worried about backlash within the police department, fearing divisions might deepen. On social media, hashtags trended. Justice for all. Accountability matters. End abuse of power. The city's mayor held a press conference, promising reforms, increased oversight, community engagement, bias training, and transparent disciplinary processes. For once, promises felt genuine. At home, Agent Morgan allowed herself a quiet moment. The mission had succeeded, but at a cost. She knew the work ahead would be harder. For every Brian Lowe taken down, another might rise to fill the void. But she believed in the law, not as a weapon, but as a shield for the innocent. Her phone buzzed with new case files, fresh battles demanding attention. Her eyes settled on a photograph pinned to the bulletin board, an image of a diverse city, hopeful and waiting, the kind of city she fought for. Weeks later, the trial began. Brian faced not only the charges related to the parking incident, but also the broader accusations of misconduct. Victims testified. The evidence was overwhelming. Body cam footage contradicted his reports. Witnesses recounted harassment and abuse, and internal documents revealed attempts to cover up complaints. The defense tried to paint him as a dedicated officer overwhelmed by a difficult job, but the jury was not swayed. In the courtroom, the judge's tone was firm as he delivered the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Brian's fall from grace was complete. The verdict reverberated beyond the courtroom walls. Police departments nationwide took notice. The case became a reference point for discussions on police reform and accountability. Cities began reviewing their own practices. Activists used the case to push for changes long denied. For the citizens of Atlanta, the judgment was a reassurance that no one was above the law. At a community center, a forum was held to address police-community relations. Agent Morgan spoke, not as a prosecutor, but as a citizen. "We all want safety and justice," she said. "But justice cannot be selective. It cannot be blind to race or privilege. Our goal is to build a system that protects everyone equally." Her words sparked conversations, inspired new partnerships, and encouraged healing. The media caught glimpses of the young man from the courtroom, the one who had silently acknowledged Morgan. His story emerged, a local community organizer who had witnessed years of injustice but never lost hope. He called the trial a victory, not just for himself or his neighbors, but for anyone who had ever felt powerless. As the sun set over Atlanta, the city was different. Still imperfect, still struggling, but moving. Agent Morgan packed her case files and prepared to leave town, ready for the next challenge. Before she left, she visited a small memorial near the courthouse, a simple plaque dedicated to those who had fought for justice and equality. She touched the cold metal, whispering, "We keep going." Because in the end, justice is not a destination. It's a journey.